Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, coming to you live from Texas in a hotel room, so apologizing up front. Audio may not be the best, video isn't going to be the best, but we have to talk about our final predictions for Best Picture before we dive into the Cannes Film Festival.
Yes, Cannes is coming up and it's going to shake up the race so much. I would actually say maybe shake up the race a little bit less than last year. I think now that we have our jury for the festival, we can see that this is a very opposite jury to what we had last year. I mean, last year we had Greta Gerwig, we had J.A. Bayona, we had Hirokazu Koreeda, as well as Eva Green, Lily Gladstone, Nadine Labaki. I mean, there was tons of actors and filmmakers in that jury lineup last year who had much more mainstream sensibilities. This year, our lineup of jury is basically all art house filmmakers and like Jeremy Strong and Halle Berry. It's not making me feel like we're gonna get something like a Nora winning the Palm. I'm expecting something very artsy to win.
I think one of the most interesting things that we're going to see this year is to see how impactful Cannes is going forward, because kind of like what you're saying here, our jury is very out there. They're going to have a very unique taste that definitely does not go with the conventional grain of, like you were saying, with like Greta Gerwig, Lily Gladstone, a very Americanized jury. And it's like what we've seen in years past is some Cannes films hit, some Cannes films don't, but Cannes consistently over the last few years has become a main staple for at least one, if not multiple Best Picture nominations. So it'll be intriguing to see this year. Do we kind of dip down a little bit? Because last year we had three arguably top six movies in the Best Picture race. This year, is it just going to be one? Are we going to stay with two, three, or can we potentially even break our expectations and go even higher? So I think for this Best Picture episode, we should switch things up a little bit because our number ones are kind of the same as what we've talked about in the past. Matt with Marty Supreme, myself with Die My Love / Begonia kind of battling it out. But there is one movie that has come out that everyone has seen that we originally were a little hesitant to put inside our top tens, but now we both have Ryan Coogler's Sinners in our top 10.
Yeah, I mean, Sinners has really come and it's raised up a storm. It's pretty amazing that this has been such a huge box office critical success. Audiences love it. They keep going back for more. Now, admittedly, before we get into all of this, I have to come clean and say I didn't like Sinners. I, it wasn't for me, unfortunately. I've seen it twice now and it doesn't do it for me, unfortunately. So this is going to be a long year for me. I'm getting flashbacks to Oppenheimer. Um, but overall, I mean, despite my bias, maybe against the film a little bit, I do think it's going to perform very strongly. But I will say, just going to come in here with some cautions. We're so early in the year, and there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out from now until the end of the year. Yes, this movie is the zeitgeist right now. Yes, if the Oscars were held tomorrow or next month, this would be at the top of everyone's lists. It would be the thing that everyone is talking about. The question I have is, can it sustain that through the year? I think very much it can for nominations, but when we start thinking about wins, right? Like this is a big blockbuster horror movie. We've got more big horror movies, prestige horror movies coming out later in the year. I mean, Frankenstein could come and steal some thunder from Sinners, possibly. Or, in terms of blockbusters, Avatar, Wicked, both are going to drop and they're going to make a shit ton of money right at the end of the year. And I do think what we saw a little bit with Dune last year is that it was the zeitgeist at the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year, there were other movies, blockbusters coming out that captured those audience attentions the same way, but more recently. So I don't know. I think Sinners is really strong for nominations, but when people start talking about, "Ooh, is this the next Everything Ever All at Once?" I don't know, man. I would not go that far.
I think that Sinners is going to be a very interesting case over the course of award season this year because, like you've mentioned, there is so much burning passion for this movie right now. It's defying expectations at the box office. And I mean, Warner Brothers, we talked about this year after year. They're great at getting nominations. They really only have one other film this year that we talked about throughout our earlier predictions, being One Battle After Another from Paul Thomas Anderson. And
Two if
we've
you count
seen
F1.
two if you count F1, but like The thing with Warner is they usually prioritize a film. We saw one exception with that with Dune and King Richard. And the reason why I think both of those movies did coexist that season is the fact that King Richard was attached to an above the line acting win, and Dune was the tax sweeper of that season.
Mhm.
Now, you could kind of make a case they're kind of the same thing here. If Sinners could be a huge tech contender and one battle after another could pose an acting winner, but I'm not really seeing that avenue for either film at the moment. And the biggest thing working for Sinners is also the biggest thing working against it is the fact that it's dominating conversation at this moment. April, May, maybe will carry over into June as well. This year
Mhm.
has historically been really, really bad for film just at large, both at the box office as well as just critical darlings to release so far this year. And Sinners is the first truly great film that most people can agree upon. So it's just like, will people still be shouting from the top of the rooftops about this movie and saying how it needs to sweep and dominate? Once Cannes happens and we have so many new films coming to the scene, once the summer box office season happens and we have other films that will perform better at the box office and get equally, maybe not equally, but still positive to great audience and critical reception. And then obviously we still have everything else for the rest of the year. And Sinners is a movie I feel like from when I first saw it before the mainstay audience got to see the film felt like a great film for text. I was thinking the three audio categories of sound, score, song. Now, since I'm warming up to the film and best picture, I can kind of see stuff coming along like costumes, like casting. There's some other things I've seen people say, like, oh, it's a lock for a win, like cinematography or production design that I don't fully understand, but I guess there's a chance for this movie to reach the heights that some people out there say of 10 to 12 nominations. But for me, this seems like that very secure 5 to 7 type thing if it's in best picture.
Dude, if this gets a production design nomination, I will fucking scream. It's not that it's bad work. It's just that people are forgetting that because they like a movie doesn't mean it has to be the best at everything. And production design, it's a barn with lights in it. That's all it is. And maybe, sure, yeah, there's the street that the shops are on, but that's in the movie for 5 minutes, and it looks like everything else we've seen of that.
And the difference there is the fact that a lot of those movies that get those extra nominations are usually the best picture frontrunners. There's a chance Sinners does actually become that and defies
Mhm.
expectations to run the season from April throughout all the way till next March. But like we talked about this in our previous episode, when is the last time a movie has done that? And you can make the
You
case
could
like,
argue
oh,
everything ever all at once.
you could, and that is a great case. The thing with that is a lot of people were not really on that train. I know I personally
Exactly.
wasn't until Fableman's Hat came out, which was, I think, the main, at least going towards like the publications and the pundits, was the main front runner. Just like how in other years we could make the case like, oh, Oppenheimer went coast to coast, but a lot of the publications that year were of Kills of the Flower Moon until that film released and Oppenheimer released. So it's just like I can see the avenue for it, but I feel like a lot of people are going a little too high where it could be like a Dune 2 from last year, like you're talking about, where it does become a player at the end of the year. It does stay a mainstay in certain categories, but when other things come into the scene, other things get equally, if not more, positive reactions, kind of takes away those nominations. And it's still solidly a Best Picture nominee, but it's not that upper echelon that people are hoping for right now. I mean, I love the movie. I would love to see this thing dominate award season, but I just don't see it.
Well, the thing that we have to keep in mind with Everything Everywhere All at Once is that when it first came out, people, yeah, it was a sensation, but people weren't talking about it in Oscar terms. That was not a part of the conversation. I remember the first time that I saw a post on Reddit where someone was saying, should we be taking Everything Ever All at Once seriously for Oscars? And people went, you are fucking insane. That is a ridiculous thing to say. And then even when, because we started our channel that year in May, and I predicted for the very first time Everything Ever All at Once to win in June. And I held that prediction all year long. But from June until maybe November, people were still commenting or messaging saying, you guys are fucking idiots. There's no way Everything Ever All at Once even gets nominated. And that was a pretty dominant part of that conversation. Like, it's very easy to see how Everything Ever All at Once ended up running the table at the end of the year and think it was always like that. It wasn't. And I think that helped Everything Everywhere All at Once a ton because when you got to the end of the year, there was still genuinely most of the Academy probably had not seen the film until award season came around. It was a sensation among a very specific group, and then it grew and grew and grew off of that. The thing with Sinners is if we're all talking about it as an Oscar movie from now to the end of the year, those voters are going to see it early. And they're going to eventually forget about it, bits and pieces, possibly. That's a big statement to make, but I just feel like with the conversation, if people were just talking about this as a good horror movie that doesn't have a chance at the Oscars, that would be a different thing. But the conversation around it is awards. And can that last for the next 9 months? I am not sure about that. With Sinners out of the way, Dylan, we got to talk about your number one, which I keep coming at you for week after week. I'm so sorry. I have to attack Die My Love once again. I know that we're hearing some good buzz. We're hearing some positive screening information. People are liking Die My Love on the Cannes committee, it seems. So, yeah, very good buzz around it. However, I just rewatched a few Lynn Ramsey movies, man. I'm telling you, I am telling you, this is not the project. This is not the project. Okay, so I just watched her movie Morvern Caller, which is about a woman whose boyfriend kills himself, and then she lets the body rot on the floor, and then she steals a book that he's written and pretends it's her book and makes some money off of it and goes to Spain, and then whatever. It's a dissociative movie. And everything I'm getting from Die My Love is that same sort of sense of you've got a main character who is just completely dissociating through the entire movie. It is a film about psychosis. It's a film about a character who is just super fucked up and is not really doing anything. And what I'm getting out of that is maybe I could see Jennifer Lawrence get some buzz, especially the more I read about what Die My Love is, which is basically a mother wishing that she was dead for 2 hours. Like it's Night Bitch without the dog stuff. Um, but really where I'm at here is just no matter how good this movie is, I don't know how it's going to have that thing that the Academy needs, right? It's dissociative cinema. And the only film like it that I can think of that got into the Oscars is The Zone of Interest. But that was a film, it was a historical drama about the Holocaust. And yes, it was dissociative, but it still had that extra thing. You know, you remove the Holocaust from Zone of Interest, make that exact movie. That is not an Oscar movie. And that's how I feel about Die My Love. So I'm curious, has your opinion at all changed on this movie? Or are you still holding strong?
I mean, it really hasn't changed yet because my whole case behind Die My Love, and yes, I admit maybe putting it at number one is a little too far, but I want to have something different. It's one I can see an avenue for, but there's been those reports that you've talked about this film is very, very good, or at least up the Cannes jury alley. And that was always my case. And I think it's going to be the most interesting thing this year coming out of the Cannes Film Festival is what we talked about at the start of this episode. How impactful has Cannes become on the awards trajectory race in these last few years? Because is it a place where people go year after year to find, hey, these are the best movies of the year? We need to prioritize these. We need to shower these with awards, whether that's the critic circuit or the televised circuit. Or is it still kind of where it was the year of like Titan and some of those previous award winners where people can acknowledge that they are great films, but they're just a little too out there. They're just a little too unable to connect with them at large. But I think one major thing that is working in Die My Love's favor is what you talked about a little bit before about Jennifer Lawrence and the performance that she can give, as well as the subject matter, because it does dive into postpartum depression, or that's something that a lot of people are affected and impacted by year after year. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people out there could relate to. And it could help further propel this film to become a little bit more emotional, a little bit more connective than just what the overall premise at first kind of gives. But like I said, I do admit number one, probably too high, but it's a fun number one to have at this moment where a lot of the other films that have equally, if not bigger, red flags, at least at this moment.
Okay, so let's run through all of the Cannes films that we've got in our top 10. So we might as well do that. So for me, I've got Sentimental Value at my number four spot here. And that is because I feel like this could be win competitive in original screenplay. I feel like Sentimental Value has big acting prospects with Renata Reinsve, Stellan Skarsgård, and Inga, I can't remember her, something Lilius. That's her name. Inga Lilius. We're gonna cut out the middle name there. Again, so sorry to the Norwegians out there for me butchering that. But sentimental value, just I know that it's very possible this is the La Chimera of this year, the film that we think going into Cannes could be really big, that just ends up not doing anything. But I just watched all of Joachim Trier's movies back to back to back. I read a ton of stuff about him, where his mind's at, what he wants to do in his movies. And it has convinced me more and more that this is not the worst person in the world was not a fluke. It was not a coincidence that that movie was so big. This is what he's been building towards his entire career. The sort of grand scope, looking at the entire world through this one story. That's what he's really interested in doing. I think sentimental value is going to be a lot more like The Worst Person in the World than I feel like a lot of people are expecting. And then you add on to the fact that it's also a show business movie. It's a family drama comedy kind of set within Norway's film industry, bringing in Hollywood actors as well. I just feel everything about this is saying there is something here. And, I know I've made this mistake in the past. Last year, I was really on Partenope from A24 as like, this is going to be the Cannes breakout. But Paolo Sorrentino, my whole reasoning there was just, he's going to make an awards movie sometime. But Joachim Trier, I I really see something in him that if this was an English language film, I really feel like 100% everyone would have it in right now. And I know a lot of people do have it in at the moment. It's a pretty widely predicted thing, but I think there's a good reason for that. Joachim Trier, man, he's got something special.
And I mean, if sentimental value it does have the juice and it is coming for that Best Picture nomination, I think that you should give a little bit more credit to Elle Fanning. I mean, I think we saw last year with A Complete Unknown that she has people who want to see her succeed. She won multiple awards in the lead up to that film. She got a lot of positive buzz for that movie. That could be her stepping stone here, or maybe she doesn't have the biggest roles, but sometimes we see that the people who are not the showiest still get in because of the name and the buzz around them that is building inside Hollywood.
It's possible, but I don't think that she's going to have a big role whatsoever. It reminds me of when they put Elizabeth Moss in Ruben Östlund's The Square, or even like Woody Harrelson in Triangle of Sadness. You bring in one Hollywood actor that gives you a little bit of clout, helps you to fundraise a little bit more money. And the way I see this movie is very much a family drama. And then we get a few moments on the film set where we see Elle Fanning interact, but I really don't believe she's going to be a focal point of the film. And, to me, I see a family drama. I'm not putting in someone outside the family for a nomination here. So to me, it's the dad and it's the two sisters.
Well, speaking of Hollywood, another Cannes film that I have in my Best Picture lineup is Ari Aster's Eddington. And I mean, the buzz around this movie continues to grow. We've heard a lot about this movie while no one has yet to see it. We do have a trailer for it, and I just feel like this has the potential to explode if it connects in the right way. Obviously, this jury has a very unique sense of taste. Will that line up with what Ari Aster has to present? Maybe,
No,
maybe
no,
not.
it won't.
We'll
No,
have to see. But
Dylan,
from all
no.
accounts, Eddington is a 180 from anything that he's done in the past. And people who have worked on the film have said this is one of the most interesting and unique films that they have ever been a part of. The fact that A24 is sending this to Cannes of all places tells me that they at least have some sort of confidence in the movie. Maybe not for awards, but confidence in the fact that it is going to be appealing and that it has something to say. And this is one where if it does connect, I can see this being a major player across the board. But even if it is not a huge Best Picture movie, it could be Ari Aster's first ticket to a nomination with a solo screenplay nom.
I can totally see that. And the way I'm viewing this one at this point is this is going to be, I think, A24's number two all year long, which means it's going to float around that possible spot. I apparently, the screenplay of Eddington has been floating around the internet. I have not gotten my hands on it, but I've read some comments from people who have read it recently saying this movie is absolutely insane. Actually, it was the same comment that had also read the screenplay of Weapons and said that Weapons is not very good, actually, which is disappointing to hear because that trailer slaps. But they were saying Eddington is insane. They didn't say good or bad. They said it's unlike anything else. Because I think something we've seen over and over in past years is the Academy really likes to go towards things that they've never seen before, things that sort of push boundaries or break out of what is expected from movies. So Eddington has some stuff that could really carry it forward. But again, I don't know if I can buy Ari Aster at this point. I think one day he's going to make an Oscar movie. And like you said, I could see a solo screenplay nomination for this one. And then maybe a few movies down the line he gets in. This could be his lobster to an eventual The Favorite or Poor Things, right? Because Yorgos Lanthimos is another filmmaker. Watching his early stuff, I would go, yeah, there's no fucking way this guy ever makes an Oscar movie. But then The Lobster came about. He gets a screenplay nomination. I could see that trajectory for Ari Aster for sure. And so the last of the Cannes titles that we have in our top tens, I have Sound of Falling at my number 8 position here, a film that we still don't know a ton about other than the amazing buzz around the movie. I've seen Masha Shalinsky, who did Sound of Falling. I've seen her previous film now, and I can definitely say that while that film was not perfect, it showed a lot of potential, and it's possible that she's been working away at perfecting this film for quite some time. Sound of Falling, all we know is that people have been buzzing about this as a Palm competitive movie for months now. And it seems to have a bit of a fantasy angle to it, set in a period drama sort of setting. There's something unique about this. We don't know enough to really make talking points of this, but I just want to see who buys this one. Is it Neon? Is it Sony Pictures Classics? That's what I need for a big contender. Now, that said, we have also heard that this is screening on the first day of the festival, which is a bad omen for awards chances. I don't think any movie screening on the first day of the festival has won the Palm in at least 10 to 15 years. So statistically, it's not in a great spot, especially because by the time that the jury deliberates about the Palm by the end of the festival and what will win, they are not thinking about the first movie that they watched. So that could be a detriment to Sound of Falling, but at the same time, the buzz around this is too big to ignore. Now, I think we should move into some films that could either be hurt by or hurt Sinners, because Sinners is three things. It is a horror movie, it is a blockbuster, and it is a music movie. So I think let's break down the films that fit into those categories, which could come along later in the year and either be killed by Sinners or take a stake to Sinner's heart. So the first one to talk about, let's get into these blockbusters because I believe both of us have both Wicked for Good and Avatar Fire and Ash in our top tens. Are we feeling like those can coexist with Sinners and we can have three massive blockbusters in the top 10?
I think they totally can. I think you look to years past, you have two, arguably three sometimes. In some years, you can even make the case for four films that go over $100 million domestically that get inside our Best Picture race. And I think that the fact that these three films have very little in terms of their plot as well as their visual style that really overlaps with one another, that they all can coexist. They're all three from different studios. They're all three going for a different dynamic of voter. Wicked is this grand musical, and I think if anything, it's Wicked and Avatar that kind of counteract each other because they're both more in that fantasy realm where they're having these huge sets and reimaginings of either prior IP or continuation of IP. While Sinners is, yes, it has that little bit of a fantastical aspect, but if anything, I think there's another movie that's more kind of a roadblock either for Sinners or for that film to really succeed in terms of these major wins. Because heading into this year, there was all this talk about, oh, there's two movies about this IP or there's two movies dealing with the same exact topic. While at the end of the day, a lot of those movies either got pushed or seemingly aren't as major as contenders as people thought they originally were. But the fact that we have two, I wouldn't even call them full-on horror films because I think that Sinners and Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein are not going to be the traditional like, oh, jump scare, blah blah blah, scary, spooky monsters throughout. They have horror themes, but I mean, I know this is a huge talking point that we've had in the past, and I feel like we'll continue throughout this season. I feel like if you go into Sinners and you leave it thinking that movie is primarily a horror film, I feel like you looked at the movie completely wrong.
I agree. Honestly, on a personal level, and people are going to yell at me for saying this, Sinners feels like an MCU movie in a lot of ways. And that can be positive and negative. So, but I won't rag on Sinners any more than I already have. But yeah, I mean, Frankenstein is also competing in that sort of horror realm. But this one we know is going to be much more of a gothic tragedy than it is just a straight on horror film. Del Toro is not going to do Frankenstein the way that I think people might expect him to. So I do feel like these two, it's going to be interesting to see, can they coexist? How are they going to coexist? Even though they are very different topics, they are still both, you can look at them from a distance and say vampires, Frankenstein.
And I do agree with that. And I think that kind of goes back to my comparison of Sinners to something like The Substance, which I talked about a little bit in the review here on the channel, is the fact that both of those movies, I think, are more so horror adjacent than being horror as their main genre. I know we talked about this with The Substance in the past, but I think that's one of the reasons why those films, or potentially both of those films, can succeed here with the Academy and award season at large, is they're pulling from that genre. But they're primarily something else, something that's more palpable for audiences at large. And I mean, going back to last year, even with that Nosferatu Substance comparison, is Substance was really a non-starter in a lot of below the line categories from the jump outside
Yes.
of makeup, while Nosferatu was a consistent mainstay in a lot of those categories that people thought Substance should have been more prevalent in, like costumes, like production design, like score, while Nosferatu showed up not everywhere, but mostly everywhere for all three of those categories. And I guess going back a little bit, not to glance over both Avatar and Wicked, I do feel like Sinners, I guess, could a little bit affect them in terms of this populist appeal. But like I talked about before, we've seen various box office hits be able to succeed when they're not stepping on each other's toes. Like, even though you don't think of Elvis as a huge blockbuster film, it still made a fair share amount of money that year. That and Top Gun Maverick and Avatar: The Way of Water were all able to live in that award season because they were all coming at it from different angles. And I think even more so than Sinners going against Frankenstein while both being horror adjacent films, the biggest roadblock in either Sinners or its competition way is going to be the Warner Brothers dynamic of Sinners and One Battle After Another.
That is true. And to talk about one battle after another, I have to admit something that's a little bit of hypocrisy here because my reason for not having one battle after another in is I think it's going to be a big flop. I feel like the trades are going to give it a really, really, really hard time. And I feel like Warner Brothers in general is going to do everything they can to sweep it under the rug after it flops. So that's a little bit my feeling around one battle after another. However, granted, I also have Marty Supreme as my Best Picture winner, a film that cost $75 million, which likely won't gross that back. So I do have to reckon a little bit with why am I so unconfident in one thing that I think will be a flop when I'm so high on something else that'll be a flop. And I think the reason is just knowing I feel like the box office is going to matter more to Warner Brothers. If this gets decent but not amazing reviews, I'm talking like 70s on Metacritic. People like it, but they're not over the moon about it. And this ends up making like 50 million to 70 million dollars. This will be seen as almost like a Babylon level disaster. And that's something that has me holding back really, really big time on one battle after another. So
I think what will be so intriguing for the rest of the year is really just what is the reaction and what is the conversation around one battle after another. Is it as negative as what you are predicting, or is it a little bit more positive, like what I'm feeling with at this moment? Because I think one big thing, especially with Oscar films or big budget films from these big name directors that do flop, it is more so the trade's initial reactions to those movies. We go back to what happened with Sinners just a few weeks ago. I don't think any of that press around the film was organic. It was the studios were mad, not Warner. The other studios were mad about the deal Warner gave to Ryan Coogler. They told Variety, hey, shit on this movie, here's some money. And Variety, most likely, did that because you go back to comparables of other films that performed around the same mark, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Jordan Peele's Nope. They did about the same money opening weekend, both domestically and internationally, and they got, oh, this is so great. Great director making an original product. Look at them go. And I feel like when we get later into the year, even if One Battle After Another isn't a huge box office success, unless it dips to the lows of Babylon, which did like 5 million opening weekend, something very atrocious like that. I might be too low with that, but it was very atrocious. It set a record for, not a record, but it was like in the top five of worst wide openings of all time for a movie over $100 million budget. If One Battle After Another is there, totally agree with everything that you said. But I still think that this film's going to do similar, if not a little bit more, than Killers of the Flower Moon because it's going to have a shorter runtime. It's going to be a more accessible subject matter. It's going to have comedy in it. And Leo is actually going to be able to do press for the movie because Killers of the Flower Moon came out at a time where the actors were on strike. No one could talk about the movie. They did some pre-recorded TV interviews, but they couldn't go to events. They couldn't promote this film in real time. And I feel like this is a movie that will do fine. It's not going to be a success, but it's also not going to be a colossal year-end top charting flop like we just saw from Deadline a few weeks ago that had like Joker Folie do there, but which was the biggest flop of last year. And I think that's one of the main reasons why, in addition to the critical reception of the movie, why Warner completely dropped it and didn't even fight for text, where you could argue that the film, even if you hate the movie, it still has deserving tech nominations.
So the other thing that we have to think of in relation to Sinners is the musical component of this. How many music movies can we have in the top 10? Obviously, I'm not going to consider Wicked against this, but I am thinking about both Deliver Me From Nowhere and I am thinking about The Rivals of Amizah King, both of which are very much music movies in addition to whatever else they are. I'd say Deliver Me From Nowhere hurt a little bit less by this because it is a biopic, it is a Springsteen movie. But Rivals of Amizah King, man, like that was already suffering for me. And now to hear that there's another Southern blues movie that's out there that is getting all this attention, I don't see how Amizah King can coexist with Sinners.
I completely agree with that point. I think even before Sinners emerged as this huge contender, Mziah King had a lot of red flags against it. The fact that it hadn't sold yet, the fact that it did get a lot of glowing reviews, but they were almost equally as many as like, it's fine, it's not great. Reactions out of South by Southwest, and the fact that we've gone so much time without a sale, the fact that some studios that don't have real contenders have bought other movies, especially like
Yes.
Lionsgate buying Kiss of the Spider Woman, it just is seemingly more and more that either this film is not an awards contender, or more realistically, this movie is coming out or 2026.
Well, that's where I'm at with this. So I've said before, when is the last time that a movie took this long to sell and then ended up being an Oscar player? And the answer is either The Apprentice, which had the asterisk of the lawsuit against it from Trump, which is a special case, or never. There's never like movies sell quickly if they are going to be an awards player. And yes, you can bring up the point that Amziah King, apparently they're asking for far too much money. However, if a studio saw this as a big either financial or awards player, something that would fit really well into their slate, they would have bought it. And what we're about to see, we've gone almost 2 months now from Amziah King premiering without a sale. That's a long, long time for it to go completely unsold. And we're about to see when people go to Cannes, they're going to buy movies at Cannes. And after that, it's just going to be undeniable. No one really wants Amziah King that bad. They're going to make big sales, big acquisitions. They're going to spend the money. And Amziah King is going to remain unsold until TIFF. Now, to that point, let's just quickly touch on The Life of Chuck, which I have at my number 17. You have it in your mid 20s there. I feel like Sinners has really hurt The Life of Chuck. And it's a little bit weird to say that because they're in such different veins. But here's my argument. The Life of Chuck does not have good critical reviews. Critics, it's mixed. Mixed at best. It's like a mid 60s on Metacritic. It's probably going to be 70s to 80s. It's going to be positive on Rotten Tomatoes, but overall, a mid 60s Metascore is not very good unless you have the audience firmly on your side. The only way that this could end up being a massive contender is if it ends up being an audience sensation through the summertime that people keep coming back to and back to and back to. But we've got Sinners already. We've got Sinners as the audience movie that audiences are repping, that critics like more. And if at the end of the year, if at the end of the year you don't have audiences bringing up Life of Chuck, no one's going to be bringing up Life of Chuck. So I feel like Sinners has really, really hurt it as the early audience hit.
Life of Chuck is a movie that I have never really been on board with, and I think that the just baggage with this film is continuing just to build to a point where it just is going to keep dropping down people's lists. And I think there's a chance even like post can there's a good chance a lot of pundits just don't even have this in their top 25 because we'll know who Neon's real competitor is. We know that the audience is backing Sinners and potentially even other films throughout the summer and later into this year. And the fact that Chuck's package is just not that deep. Screenplay, supporting actor, is that enough? When you're not this huge hit with either critics or audiences, like have we seen in the past, huge critical movies like Nickel Boys or Women Talking kicking in with just one additional nomination. Chuck isn't going to have that support behind it. So at this point, we've talked about a lot of contenders so far. We've bounced up and down both of our respective lists, but we have yet to talk about a movie that we both have at number two, as well as Matt's projected winner for this upcoming year. So Marty Supreme, Begonia, let's dive into him.
Okay, quickly, I'll talk about Marty Supreme, and I'll just say I've seen some of the comments saying there was one comment that stood out to me last time saying the more you talk about Marty Supreme, the more I'm convinced that you don't actually believe this is a contender, like that you can't hear. How can you not hear that this sounds like the anti-contender? And what I'll say to that is, sure, but at the same time, something that we've come to expect from the Oscars at this point is that they are going for things year after year that if you were to just say what it is out loud, it doesn't sound like an Oscar movie. It's the movie itself that becomes an Oscar movie. And to my point earlier, this is going to lose money. It is going to lose money. It's not going to be a $150 million hit, which is what it would need to end up breaking even. However, it's from an independent studio. I don't think it's going to be judged as harshly on losing money as a film like One Battle After Another is, which is a big studio movie. So Marty Supreme, despite the fact that there could be some of the things going against it that I've said with other films, it just feels like A24 has such confidence in it. There's this the publicity machine has already begun for this film with Timothy Chalamet doing interviews about it, Gwyneth Paltrow doing interviews about it. Everyone seems to be really excited about this movie. So I feel confident until I see a trailer and see something that really convinces me that maybe A24 isn't fully behind this, or maybe this is going to be an even bigger failure than I expect it to be, or maybe this isn't going to be the massive critical hit audience cult classic that I'm expecting it to be. That would dissuade me, but until I see more, I don't know. Also, I think another thing that would dissuade me from putting it at my number one spot would be if it fully misses Venice. I'm hearing rumors that A24 might not send it to film festivals, and that would worry me. If they're treating this like the Iron Claw, I would be scared. But at the moment, I'm not thinking that this is their Iron Claw of the year. I'm thinking that this is their big, we're going all in financially and critically, awards darling financial hit. Awards darling box office hopefully does well. That's what I want to see with this.
And I think the weird thing around Marty Supreme right now is the fact that so many people do believe in it. Like this seems like a film that people would immediately shoot off, be like, no, this is never happening. But the fact that it is the leading contender on awards expert, I'm sure when Gold Derby opens up, it will be top three, top four. That's not a knock against the movie. That's just something very interesting I've seen with the discussion around Marty Supreme so far. And I guess on that same note of studio's top priority, it seems too good to be true. Focus features Begonia. I mean, Yorgos Lanthimos, we've seen in the past, he either hits hard or he misses entirely. Outside of The Lobster, it's been either 8, 9, 10 plus nominations, or it has been a zero spot. And I feel like Begonia, at least everything that we've heard around it, Focus believes in this movie. In fact, they just changed the release date to exactly mirror what the holdovers had in this year, where it's going to have a limited theatrical run for 1 or 2 weeks, and then it will go out wide. So it's diverting from what Conclave originally had being the same thing, and they eventually just sent Conclave wide. Maybe after its premiere, if it's at Venice, if it's at Telluride, those are places where Focus does like to premiere their films. Begonia will go to straight wide release like what Conclave had last year, but pair this with the fact that Lanthimos, when he does connect well, it's because the films have something to say on modern culture, which Begonia seems like it's going to be ripe with its screenplay and the film that it's based on. And you add to the fact that Focus's other films inside the race, just have giant blemishes against them so far. Hamnet feels like the Blitz of previous years, where you can be like, oh yeah, this film sounds so good, but when you take a step back and you look at things a little bit deeper, like what a lot of people, myself included, should have done with Blitz last year. Why was the film not at Cannes? Why was the film seemingly delayed year after year? Why did no theatrical distributor want to pick it up when Apple has found partners for movies like Argyle and found partners for movies like Napoleon? So even if the films aren't critically loved, they still find partners to go to the box office. And Hamnet, while yes, it has distribution with Focus, Focus originally did not have much promo for it at SummitCon. They didn't even have a date for it. They've recently have given a date, but it's not a home run date, at least for the studio. It's like early December limited, going wide in like the middle of December, which is a place where we haven't really seen Focus play with an awards contender in that scene. They either wait till Christmas or they're going in that late October, early November slot.
It is true. Focus likes their October slot. However, I mean, it would be dishonest to say that a December release is bad for Hamnet. I think that's a very good release. But historically, with the studio, you're right. Their contenders are October movies or early November. And late November, early December is a little bit odd for them.
And I guess before we move away from Focus and A24 with Marty Supreme, we've already talked about Eddington, but I feel like it's worth at least mentioning the Smash Machine at this point. We just got a trailer for it. It made some buzz online. And I just go back to this point around this film of there has to be something to this, whether it is going to a major festival, whether it is a vehicle for Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I just feel like there is going to be a huge discussion around this movie that will carry it throughout award season. How far? That's going to be the real question. Can this get all the way to picture, or is it just stopping with The Rock and maybe Emily Blunt getting in at a few major televised awards, or can maybe it sneak into something like makeup or screenplay or even some other additional tech categories? And like you could point back to previous wrestling or fighting films that do not succeed, but the biggest thing they all have against them is, for the most part, a lack of festival presence, as well as a lack of this is what the campaign is centered around. The one exception to that is Darren Aronofsky's film, now I'm blanking on the name, with Mickey Rourke, The Wrestler. Simple
Yeah.
enough name. That one did go to a festival. That one did have a central focus around Mickey Rourke, and it did go far inside award season, while other things like that Jake Gyllenhaal Southpaw movie from a few years ago, or all the boxing movies we see year after year, and even the Iron Claw from a few years ago, most of them don't go to the prestigious festivals. Now, if Smash Machine is just TIFF, yeah, that probably tells me what we need to know about the movie. But if it's going to Venice or Telluride, then I think there's a little bit more to it. And maybe not a win, but The Rock could be a very mainstay in the Best Actor race.
I wouldn't take anything. If it was at Telluride, I'd be like, yeah, sure, cool. If it was in Venice competition, I might take it a little bit more seriously. But God, that I didn't like that trailer one bit.
I liked
Did
it.
nothing for me. I thought The Rock looked abysmal. That's his makeup was very good, very impressive makeup, but I just was getting nothing from him in the trailer, and it looks so boring to me. I mean, the rumor is that they're trying to hide how weird the movie actually is, and apparently this is the only way they can market it is just pretending that it's not a really strange movie, but. God, give me some of that weirdness. This looks so bland the way it is right now. I don't know.
But that goes back to our discussion we had in our acting video around the Smashing Machine, is the fact that who are you going to market this movie for? Who has been the test audiences that we've heard have not liked the movie? Are they the people who typically go see movies with The Rock in them, who are seeing Jumanji and seeing the Fast movies? Or are they screening this film to the people who love these weirder Josh Safdie or Benny Safdie equivalent type movies? And I think that's really where the question comes for this movie is, who is going to be the first audience to see it? And I think that's how the film continues to go, because if it gets trashed upon arrival, yeah, DOA, it's not going anything. But if it does premiere to, let's say, a Venice crowd that it's up their alley because of how weird and out there and bold it could be, then yeah, we can see it progress, and maybe it still misses picture, but it has enough goodwill from the jump where a specific audience is behind it to carry it the whole way. And obviously it's not a one for one, but think of something like The Apprentice last year, where if that premiered at maybe an American festival or maybe something like TIFF, maybe it doesn't connect as well as it does with some more international voting members than had it gone to Cannes, or maybe if it was held until Venice.
So let's move to some specific studios and cover them because I feel like we can agree we need one movie from these studios in our Best Picture lineup. So first off, let's talk about Searchlight, who currently has three contenders being Rental Family, Is This Thing On, and way down the Roses. So at this point, I'm personally going with Rental Family, but I'm feeling less and less confident as I go. I'm starting to feel like maybe this is less of the sensation that goes throughout the year and more of like Night Bitch, where maybe Is This Thing On coming into this year that they weren't confident in Rental Family's chances and needed something else for this year. So maybe Is This Thing On could happen, but I don't know. It just feels like so small for Bradley Cooper. It feels like he's trying to show that he doesn't need to do these big, epic, awardsy movies, that he can do something that's just like basically what Noah Baumbach would do.
And that's one of the reasons why I have been high on Is This Thing On from Bradley Cooper, because it's showing a new aspect to his at least direction and his screenwriting that we haven't seen in his two previous fares. That could also be a major detriment against the movie like you're talking about here, where it is just too small. It is just too contained and too just vibesy based movie, equivalent to another Searchlight movie from last year, like A Real Pain, where maybe it can be for a specific actor or screenplay, but it's not this huge juggernaut. Because what we typically see from Searchlight, and this is referring to that graphic that we had in our original Best Picture video, I mean, A Complete Unknown, Poor Things, Banshees, Nomadland, Jojo Rabbit, The Favorite, Shape of Water, Three Billboards. These are top to down players. They rarely have a film that's their mainstay that isn't getting in like everywhere. But maybe this year is the year they have to, or on the flip side, this is finally the year that Searchlight kind of takes a back seat. They don't really have a film, and that's because 20th Century has two films, which is kind of their sister company.
Yes, that is the thing that I'm thinking with this is it's totally possible that Searchlight has nothing and that they're really trying to push Avatar and Deliver Me From Nowhere instead. But it's hard to discount Searchlight anyways. I will say, Searchlight, we always talk about them as one of the acquisition companies, but they actually never buy things outside of Sundance. Like I don't know how we've missed this in previous years when we've talked about Searchlight buying stuff, but if you go back through their history, they buy stuff at Sundance if it's for a fall release. They buy stuff at TIFF if it's for a spring release. They don't buy Cannes movies. They don't buy South by Southwest movies.
So now let's get to the last films in both of our respective top 10 for Best Picture, and they both come from Amazon MGM. You have Preparation for the Next Life. I have Hedda. And these are two films that most people don't have from Amazon MGM because they would have After the Hunt. And I think each of these films has a specific avenue to Best Picture that doesn't really correlate with the other ones. And it's just which one is going to come to fruition, because we have seen for the last few years, this studio, this division has been great at getting one film when they focus on just one film. And this year, it's just, what is that film going to be? Obviously, the most likely answer is probably After the Hunt. And both your and myself speculation on the film isn't going to come to fruition, at least on a large stay. But maybe it is one of our films back behind the unique vision behind the lens and their lead actress performance.
After the Hunt, I mean, I'll maintain I'm not a huge fan of the script of that movie. I feel like it's going to be quite controversial, and in the end, I really feel like it's an acting player and not much else. So I'm writing that off at the moment, and I do really want to believe in Preparation for the Next Life. And maybe it's silly, but we're early in the year. I think we can afford to be silly and take some big swings. Just going for the no, just going for After the Hunt, which it seems like everyone is predicting, feels a little boring. I want some spice. I want some excitement. And so for me, I'm going off of the producers here. I love the fact that Dee Dee Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and Barry Jenkins, Adele Romansky are behind Preparation for the Next Life. It's got an exciting director behind it, Bing Liu, who did Minding the Gap, plus a really cool unknown cast, and the story being about a homeless Uyghur immigrant in New York City who falls in love with an Iraq War veteran, and sort of their love story playing out on the backdrop of New York City against immigration policies and sort of this larger social scope to it. There's something really interesting there. This is a filmmaker that I could totally see breaking out. I mean, they've been trying to get Bing Liu a narrative feature for a long time. So to me, this just feels like there's so much behind it that I'm excited by.
I think a lot of the reasons why you are backing in preparation for the next life also carries over to Hedda for me because of the fact that it is coming from a director that has unique visions of the past. While yes, this one it may not be for critically acclaimed films, I still think the way that Nia DaCosta has re-envisioned Candyman and put her own unique spin to the MCU will continue here into a more narrative feature, a more dramatical piece that could have the avenue to break out and then going with acting performances as well. While this cast may not be completely unknown, it is packed with a few performers that has not had the real opportunity to fully showcase their abilities with Tessa Thompson, with Nina Hoss, where these could be potential acting nominations and could even go further for the likes of Tessa Thompson. And it does have some of the same producing partners as Preparation for the Next Life does have. I think both of these films' biggest fault against them is the fact that they're going to be very small films. They're not going to be giant box office players. They both probably combined will gross less than like $10 million domestically. And it's just really going to come down to the critical reception and if one of these actors, if one of these screenplays, or if one of these directors can really break out into their respective fields, not just for a nomination, but also for a very strong continuation for the win. Because what we've seen from Amazon MGM contenders that are very small is the fact that they overcome all their hurdles because of one specific aspect behind them. Nickel Boys, while last year it did not get nominated for director or cinematography, those are main staples throughout the entire award season. American Fiction overcame a lot of those obstacles to soar to additional nominations and even win adapted screenplay. And same thing for Women Talking, while it couldn't latch on for any acting or at that time, if casting would have been around, maybe that would have been a nomination where it could have securely gotten and maybe even won. Probably not with Everything Ever All at Once there, but
Yeah.
it still won with adapted screenplay and has shown that these Amazon MGM contenders are usually very, very strong in a specific category. While Preparation for the Next Life, it could be lead actress, it could be screenplay, Hedda could be the same thing, or even if it's After the Hunt. Honestly, all three of these films are kind of going for the same categories of two of them are for adapted, one's for original, but they're all three vying for a lead actress nomination.
Last thing we should talk about here, we have not touched on Jay Kelly yet, the Noah Baumbach Netflix movie, which we've been hearing reports might be Netflix's number one push. But I'm stubbornly holding on to Frankenstein, and my question is, can we see Netflix work their magic again and get two nominees in, as they very often have?
I totally think they can get both of these films in because what we've seen in these last few years where they've only gotten one film in, what was their number two in those respective years? Behind Maestro was, I guess, maybe Naiad, um, Rustin,
I'm
maybe.
blanking.
Those were the only two other films they really had that year, and neither of those films feel like Best Picture contenders. Last year they had Amelia Perez. What was their number two? All those films
Mhm.
failed to even break into their respective categories. So you have to go back to the previous few years where they got two, sometimes even three films in. So I can totally see Jay Kelly. I can totally see Frankenstein coexisting. I can honestly see the Catherine Bigelow White House movie playing a role inside that as well to be a potential second nomination for Netflix. The biggest thing working against Jay Kelly and the Catherine Bigelow movie, for me at least, is Frankenstein feels good for nominations at this moment. I can see a world where Catherine Bigelow's movie blanks and gets zero nominations. I can see a world where Jay Kelly is good, but it doesn't latch on to additional nominations outside of the ones that are just the safe stays, like the screenplay or maybe an acting performance with it. While Frankenstein, I feel like even if this film doesn't end up being their top contender, I still feel like it's going to be in that Nosferatu range where, like, yeah, maybe it's not in the top 10, but four or five techs, it's still top 15. And I guess right before we get out of here, let's talk about a few films that we currently don't have in either of our Best Picture predictions, but we could see rising the ranks here in the coming weeks. The first one I want to talk about at least is F1, a film that I've had in my Best Picture lineup. I still do have performing well up below the line. It's just I need to make room for Sinners, and I mean, with what my current Best Picture lineup looks like, F1 was the easy one to take out for Sinners because both of their cases to make it in were kind of the same avenues, performing well below the line, having massive audience and critical support, and being a big box office success. Sinners has done that. I can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, F1 is going to do it too. I have a movie that's doing that. I should just go ahead and put the movie that's already accomplished those goals inside my Best Picture lineup.
Yeah, bingo, bingo. Dead on. F1 is really one of the biggest movies hurt by the fact that Sinners is this huge audience hit. It's not going to have that support. And yeah, what it really relies on is Europeans and dads loving it. But they've also got Deliver Me From Nowhere. The dads have Delivered Me From Nowhere, and I'm sure the Europeans will have something else to fall in love with. So I don't know. F1, I've dropped significantly on, especially because I consider it to be a Warner movie. And that means for me, with Sinners in, F1 has to be out.
Well, there you have it. Those are our current Best Picture nominations heading into the Cannes Film Festival, which we've said multiple times here on the channel. Matt is attending the festival this year. A good friend of the channel, Arno, will be going with him, and they are going to have so much coverage. Just, I guess, talk about what you have planned coming up.
So we have tons of coverage coming up. During the festival, Arno and I will be doing a thing called the Cannes Canon, where we will be jumping back and forth between footage filmed together in Montreal, talking about the filmmakers at the Cannes competition and their profiles, what they've done before, giving you a little bit of a deep dive so that you know more about these new movies before seeing them. And then the next day, we'll always be covering those filmmakers' new films. So what we're doing with this series is giving you a look into the past of each filmmaker before we get into the future. So that's going to be running every day through the festival. And then in the days after the festival ends, I'll be releasing vlog content just like last year, but you're going to have to wait until the end of the festival to get that because we've got so much else for you. The other thing, if you're able to, we do have a donation link on Coffee, which will help support us during the festival, help us to eat and not neglect our health during the festival, and will help us to continue doing cool trips like this in the future and continuing to bring you the best coverage we possibly can of all festivals around the world, hopefully. Hopefully. So if you can, the link is in the description and feel free to donate. We'd really appreciate it. And with that said, that brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, my name's Matt.
My name is Dylan. This has been Fantasy Filmball.